The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back for another week of live podcasting excellence here on Twitch. So glad to have you along with us. I am Matt in the studio. It is time for what has typically been Music Mondays, but since we have gone live and recording this on Sunday night, actually broadcasting it live on Twitch, we'll just call it Music Weekly for now here on the Nerdcast Empire. This is our 14th edition of our weekly music review. So glad to have you along with us once again. And of course, you can catch us live each and every Sunday night on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire. Of course, you can also catch the VOD on Twitch or on our YouTube page, or you can catch this podcast in recorded form without the music clips wherever you get your podcast each and every week. Joining me in studio, the guy who puts all this stuff together each and every week, it's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. Ready for another week of a variety of music.
It was definitely
a better way to put it.
It was definitely a variety this week. I think a very interesting week of music for sure. But we were able, as always, to find some good ones in the list, and we'll be bringing those to you this week. Joining us from Parts Unknown is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Doing pretty well. Like Mike said, it was an interesting week. I think it was a rough week. I mean, it was really down to the wire when I finally got my two picks kind of sorted out between everything, but we made it right at the buzzer.
I think it was a very interesting week of music, certainly an interesting mix of different types of music. And sometimes when you have that, or sometimes you really have to get a little deeper in the catalog of some of these bands to kind of see what else is on the album and what it kind of sounds like. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time to put it together. But as we do each and every week, we will be bringing you 6 brand new albums to check out. These are albums that were released on or around May the 3rd. And then we, of course, go into the vault in our last segment of the show, where we will talk about some classic albums that you need to check out. Before we do that, we want to kind of follow up on something we talked about briefly last week because Chris wasn't here to defend himself. So we're going to give him a chance to have a little say on this. But, Mike, do you want to kind of talk about originally what the story was? It was a poll from a website that certainly something we discussed a little bit last week, and I think we're going to have some results of that poll this week.
Yeah, the Metal Sucks website released they release polls somewhat regularly. This one in question was basically a poll to vote on who the worst nu metal band was. The nu metal genre has kind of been a topic lately amongst a lot of people, so I think they were trying to capitalize on that. And all sorts of bands were on the list, some of which you could probably debate whether they were even nu metal to begin with. But when it was all said and done, the votes were calculated. The worst nu metal band, according to readers of MetalSucks.net, was Crazy Town with 1,293 votes, followed by Kid Rock at 978, Limp Bizkit with 461, Methods of Mayhem with 404, and Alien Ant Farm with 247 votes.
So I want to come back and get your thoughts in a moment, but we want to bring Chris in from Parts Unknown because
certainly
in the Discord, certainly Chris kind of feels like maybe Crazy Town is a little maligned, or maybe they are judged based on their one big hit as opposed to their whole category or collection of music. So, Chris, we're going to give you a chance not to be the official defender of Crazy Town, but maybe just to kind of give the listeners a description of why maybe their big hit doesn't necessarily represent everything that their band does.
Yeah, I mean, I get some of the hate. I mean, like you said, when you look at just Butterfly and you try to gauge their song based off of that being just so overplayed and just not lyrically just there at all. And on top of the fact, you've got their singer, Shifty Shellshock, who, I mean, if he's not famous for Crazy Town, he's famous for being on rehabilitation shows on VH1 or MTV and just kind of letting his life go nowhere, essentially. So I do get some of the hate, but I don't know if I get over 300 votes ahead of second place hate. And even more to that, I don't know that I see Kid Rock or Limp Bizkit in the top 5 at all. I mean, I despise Kid Rock, but if we're going to pick an era of Kid Rock that was, I mean, the best to listen to, in my opinion, it would be his nu metal stuff. Limp Bizkit, I mean, right up there with Korn as far as most successful in generating that sound that was new metal. So yeah, I mean, the overall the poll was a little kind of out there to me. I do like that Methods of Mayhem was listed there, and I know Mike did as well. But you've got bands down here way toward the bottom, like E Town Concrete, Snot, um, American Head Charge, and I mean these guys have less votes than bands like Papa Roach even. So it's an interesting array here. But no, I think while I get some of the hate for Crazy Town, I mentioned it in the chat for last week's episode. The Gift of Game, it just holds kind of a special place in my heart. I had it, and it does on it. But and Revolving Door, which is almost kind of like a sequel to Butterfly, I'd say. But they do have some heavier stuff on there. The intro and track 2, Toxic, I think are just really great for opening it, and even if it's not reflective of the rest of the album as a whole. But yeah, I definitely think people should give it more of a chance, even if it's not going to be your favorite thing. I don't know that it warrants Crazy Town being at the top of the worst new metal bands of all time list. And even looking at what some of the other options were, you had bands like Godsmack, Seven Dust, Static X, which I almost wouldn't consider those new metal. I mean, that's just 2000s era post grunge rock, which I feel is almost its own separate genre in itself that we should be pulling.
Yeah, totally. I think it is certainly interesting to see some of these votes, and I think the only reason I'm surprised Crazy Town ended up winning is because I feel like there was certainly a section of people that voted just based on like the visceral hate for some of these acts. Like you think about Limp Bizkit again. Goodness knows they have done enough to damage the music industry, but they had a ton of hits, like them or not. So it's kind of surprising. I feel like
Woodstock went well though.
Yeah, maybe that had something to do with it. But you know, some of those bands he mentioned at the bottom of the list, it sounded like that one. I can't remember which late night show did the bit where they asked people about their favorite bands at Coachella, and they made up just these most ridiculous names, and of course none of them were real. Like some of those, they feel like the same sort of thing. But Mike, I'll let you kind of chime in on what you think about the results.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I definitely look at the top 5, and I question, for one, whether Alien Ant Farm is new metal. Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit, I just think the success alone should exempt them from being worst of anything as far as what they've produced musically. I think Crazy Town kind of gets a lot of the hate because of just the kind of cringeworthy visual that they present. It just feels so much rooted in that new metal era, and I think that's part of it. And honestly, they really didn't do a whole lot after that album, so I think that's probably they're the people that are just going to hate vote for them. But I think when you're trying to be objective, it's like they kind of existed just in that bubble, and that was really it. Other bands like Methods of Mayhem, I think obviously deserve to be there, both because it was terrible, and I think anytime you have someone who was kind of outside of that new metal world, and kind of like older than that world, kind of infiltrate it and try to be a part of it, I think there's a place for you in the worst list. I feel the same about Machine Head, oddly enough. Like, I don't have a problem with that band themselves, but that weird era when they tried to rebrand themselves as new metal, if you go back and watch the videos from the album or two where that was the thing, they're awful. And this is a band that's actually a good band. It escapes me why they thought it would be a good idea to try to ride that new metal wave. But I think anytime you look at a subgenre like this, you could do the same with hair metal or pop punk. I think it generates some interesting conversation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I think any type of best or worst of polls are a lot of fun, just because you end up with an interesting debate. It's great for content, as we like to say in the business, but oftentimes you end up with these interesting results that maybe don't officially reflect the reality of the situation for that type of music. So certainly worth bringing up again. And if we see more polls on that website, we'll certainly bring them up during this segment and kind of use them to spur some conversation, because it's always interesting to hear kind of different perspectives when it comes to that. But we're going to move on to our new music for this week, and we're going to start off with Mike, as we always do. Mike, you picked a couple of new albums that we're going to check out. Of course, again, this is the music from May the 3rd. Some interesting stuff this week across the board, but overall, I feel like we've picked 6 really good winners this week. So we're going to start off with your first pick of your 2 picks for this week.
Yeah, I kind of regret now picking the band with all of the titles and song titles in some dialect of French. Not that I know typical French, but I certainly don't know the Gascon dialect. But anyway, my first pick is going to be from the true Gascon heavy black metal band, also kind of a folk metal band. Their name is Moisson Livide, with the album Saint Imperi Gascon.
Yeah, the one thing about this podcast is that we have chosen some bands that are from some very interesting parts of the world, and sometimes the names are all in English. When I look this one up, it's like, boy, there's not a whole lot of English to be had here. But having said that, these guys are really good. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on them.
Yeah, this is the first full-length album from them. However, when I say them, this is kind of a side project of the lead singer of the band Moisson Livide. His name is Baptiste Laben. With this band, Moisson Livide, he performs under the pseudonym D'Artagnan, which seems to be a combination of the words dark and D'Artagnan. It's kind of cool. They have this folksy kind of feel to them. He actually plays a couple traditional instruments like the bouzouki and the boha, which is a Gasconian bagpipe. The actual area that they're from is Gascony, essentially. It's the land of D'Artagnan. So that's kind of where the character came from, as well as Cyrano de Bergerac, another literary character, and Henry III of Navarre. So an area that's definitely steeped in a lot of history. And to be honest, after listening to them, it makes me want to learn more about the region and kind of everything that goes along with it.
Yeah, I think there are parts of Europe that would certainly warrant a trip just to see some of these ancient towns and cultures that are still very much alive today that you never really hear about on the news until you run into somebody that's from that region, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. I kind of want to know more about them.
Yeah, and this band, from what I gather, his original band, his main band, is a little more straight-up power metal. This one brings in a little more of kind of the black and death metal vibes, but I think it works here. Definitely makes me want to check out the other stuff, though, for sure. The album artwork looks like some map from an RPG video game that I would play, so I'm certainly excited about that. The tracks that I thought stood out, as I attempt to say them, Le Serp d'Isavit, Sus Loroda, Lomi Zins Passat, Saint Imperi Gascon, Passajada Dolorosa, which is like a traditional instrumental, which is really cool, and Cacare d'Eternitat. We'll go with that.
I'm totally impressed with your French pronunciation.
Doing my best here.
Now we're going to check out a track from this album. What are we going to be checking out today?
I believe we have the first track on the album, Le Serp d'Isavit.
We're going to check that one out. So let's do that right now here on our Music Weekly show. This is Le Serp d'Isavit. I'll do my best here, Moisson Livide. And here is that track. These guys really great sounds. And like you said, it just kind of makes me want to check out the main band as well. So really good project there. We'll bring in Chris to see if he's got any thoughts on Moisson Livide.
Yeah, I always use Encyclopedia Natthammer to get a little bit more information on the bands. When I pulled this one up, when I see black and folk metal mixed, first off, I had no idea what that would sound like, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear that. But whenever I see anything listed in the black metal realm, I always get a little skittish because the vocals don't always jive with me. But surprisingly, they did here. They weren't so far up front and in my face, and they blended well with just the bombastic background music. So very good meshing of all those sounds.
Yeah, that was great stuff. I definitely want to check out more from those guys. So definitely check that out. The first choice from Mike this week, Moisson Livide from Saint Empire Gascon. Definitely the most challenging names to pronounce this week. But you've got two picks, as always, and I don't think we'll have any trouble pronouncing the next group, thankfully. Let's check out what you got for us next.
Yeah, this one should be much, much simpler. So first, when I put the list together, my weekly list contains the artist, the album name, and as well as the record label. With this one, when I saw it pop up and I saw that it was under Epitaph Records, I immediately got a little interested, knowing that that's the record label from the guitarist from Bad Religion, Brett Gurwitz. So I figure these guys might be something worth checking out. The band themselves they call themselves West Coast reverbed out surf punk combined with tight and bouncy Brit rock, and I think it definitely shines here. This is the newest album from the band Deathlands, and it is Cold World.
Yeah, before I even knew everything that you said, because obviously you kind of get the information first when I heard some of their stuff, watching some of their album on YouTube, it's like, yeah, I could see this as a band that is somewhat related to Bad Religion, and I think you even mentioned that they're going to be touring or have toured with them, and makes total sense. But again, they got a really catchy sound. I think this makes for a really great album.
Yeah, really catchy and accessible. And to your point, yeah, in June and July, they are heading to Europe with Bad Religion to support them, so that's really cool. They started in 2012 as an instrumental project. I can only assume, just based on the write-up on the website, you kind of reach the point when you're doing that where you're like, what can we do to reach more people? How can we build this even bigger? And that was when Brian Torres decided we need to do this, and he started singing for the band, which I think would certainly open you up to a much wider audience. Their sound's clearly influenced by their upbringing in Los Angeles. I can imagine being anyone growing up in Los Angeles would be difficult, and they reference dealing with law enforcement as well as gang violence. The thing about that is, even with that being the case, it doesn't come off as pretentious in any way with their lyrical content. I think it's still really something that all audiences can appreciate. As far as standout tracks, the first track on the album's really good. So it's Turnout, Limousine, Vacant, Memory Hotline, Not Enough, and what we're going to listen to momentarily, Cold World.
Yeah, I really think these guys have, like I said, very catchy, very accessible sound, but it's accessible but not simple. I think it has a really strong message, which again, not surprising when you kind of see them in the same sphere as a band like Bad Religion that always has something to say with their music. But we're going to check out, as you said, Cold World off of this album from Deathlands, Cold World. So we'll check that out now.
A stage of run, watching the world decay. One love, power never let me show. Cold world, something's gotta give you no. One love, power never let me show. Cold world, something's gotta give you no. Something's gotta give you no.
the video that you had asked for. And you should check out the video to that.
The video
one
is
as
really
well.
cool, just in general.
It is. They really did a fantastic job with that. But Chris, any thoughts on that one? A really good Deathlands and Cold World.
Yeah, whenever I hear about a band that's got hardcore roots, I don't always attribute that to a catchy sound, but they were incredibly catchy. It was pleasant to hear that, and just overall love their message, both on the album and just as about the band as a whole. As Mike mentioned, kind of their upbringing and the way that they've grown over time, been able to put in their music, how they were raised and what they believe as far as everybody just wanting a fair system, living together, one world, one community. So great message and catchy band.
Yeah, certainly have an interesting perspective on life through their world lens, but definitely check out Deathlands with Cold World. And then if you get a chance, if you're in Europe, check them out with Bad Religion this summer, because you can't go wrong getting to see both of those bands, which would be really awesome. So 2 great picks from Mike this week. As always, we're going to move it on to Chris in Parts Unknown. Chris, you as well have picked 2 new releases as of May the 3rd. So tell us about your first pick of the week.
Yep, my first pick is a band called Crohm. That's Crohm, hailing from the Aosta Valley in Italy with their 4th full-length album, King of Nothing. I know we come across a lot of bands from the 80s or even earlier where we go, wow, how has it been so long since we've heard about this band? This one's a little more understandable. They formed in the late 80s, playing from around 85 to 88, only to kind of take a step away for a while and reappear finally in 2014, being active since then to this point. This album and their sound as a whole is just a great mix of different takes on classic metal. You've got heavy speed and thrash, as well as slow, methodically plodding songs as well. The vocals from Sergio Fiorani took some time, but they eventually grew on me. The core of the vocals are just based in classic metal sound, but there's a tinge of almost gothic rock to it, is what I heard, similar to Peter Steele of Typo Negative. The clip I've chosen is from their title track, King of Nothing, and it gives a little bit of taste of the vocals as well as the prowess of Claudio Zanchetta on guitar with a hell of a solo. So I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I did, and if you like what you hear, make sure to dig into more of their new 11-track, 49-minute album that oozes with teleported 80s metal from the great land of Italy.
I feel like we spend a lot of time in Italy on this program.
That's the truth.
No doubt about that, but for good reason, because they turn out some really great bands, and this is the latest one. This is Crohm with the song The King of Nothing. Let's check this out now.
Heavy metal inspired vibes there. I also do hear kind of more that gothic sound, especially with the vocalist. Always cool when you have a distinct vocal delivery like they do. It kind of sounds like if you took Peter Steele from Typo Negative and played him at like 1.25 speed, that's kind of what you'd end up with. Like it's kind of deep, but not in slow motion deep.
Yeah, I think I enjoy when you see those gothic vocals in non-gothic music. I think, you either get the bright vocals with the maybe more doom-sounding song. I think we had a band a week or two ago that was kind of that way, or this is kind of the reverse, where you've got more of the gothic vocal with a harder rocking song behind it. I feel like they give you a good balance there. So definitely check out Crohm. As Chris mentioned, Crohm with The King of Nothing, their album this week. As always, Chris, you have 2 picks. So what do you have for us on this Music Weekly and this May the 3rd edition on May the 19th, if you will? But talk about music from May the 3rd. What do you got for us with your second pick?
Yep. Next up for me is the solo project of acclaimed artist Keith Wallen. Many folks are going to recognize him from his work as a guitarist and backing vocalist for bands like Breaking Benjamin and Adelita's Way. But this is Keith putting himself in the forefront and letting it all air out. This is a 10-track, 33-minute album that definitely wears its inspirations from Breaking Benjamin and similar post-grunge bands on its sleeves. The opening track, Infinity, was different than what I expected. It caught my attention enough for a deeper dive into the whole album, but it initially struck me as more of a poppy prog style song, and definitely one that I wouldn't say reflected the later tracks. On that deeper dive, I found the album really builds steam as it goes. Later tracks like Nemesis and Blackout show off how heavy but clean the all-around sound of the project can be. Track 4, The Wolf, as well as the final track, Dear Father, slows things down with some heavy lyrical content, showing off Keith's abilities to convey his emotions and stories, that latter song being a tribute to his late father. And track 3, Headspace Holiday, that one was hard to skip over as my sample song, with it being a heavy riff-driven song concerning mental health. Ultimately, I chose to go with track 2, Strings, for my sample. Starting right from the beginning, there's an amazing breadth of sound, even in the small clip, and the chorus is what finally sucked me into the album and the project as a whole. So sit back, everybody, enjoy what Keith Wallen has to offer, and I hope you all love it as much as I did.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the musical talent on this album. We'll get to more of that on the other side of this clip. As Chris mentioned, we're going to start at the beginning with the song Strings from Keith Wallen and his release Infinity Now.
Bad religion to practice what they preach in church. I don't need a politician to teach me how to keep my word. I bet you like the cage. It makes you feel so safe. You accept your fate. I'm not ready to lay down and die. There's still blood.
So really impressed with that. I haven't had the chance to listen to this whole album yet, but certainly encouraged by what I've heard, both from Mike's playlist and from a little bit of that as well. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, it feels like it flirts with a little bit of techno synthy stuff at times, but then just kind of finds itself right back in home in that post-grunge modern rock element, which, I mean, it sounds great for that. It's kind of interesting. This guy's been a guitarist and backing vocalist in multiple bands when really his vocals shine so well in this album. It's amazing to think he was kind of the backing vocalist at any point in time when clearly he had the chops to front a band and still be top tier.
I kind of feel like somebody must have said something like, look, man, you need to be out in front and do your own thing, and I think it'll be a big hit. So I think that's going to take off for him. So great pick by Chris. Second pick, Keith Wallen's Infinity Now. Definitely check that out. As always, I have 2 picks as well. The first band we're going to talk about with my picks is the band Isospin with the album Aftermath Chronicles. 2-member group. You have Elias Papadopoulos on instruments and Rafael Silva on lead and backing vocals and piano. They were originally formed in 2011 back in Greece, but now they call Brisbane and Queensland, Australia home. Just a great progressive metal album. Really enjoyed this. It's got a great sound from beginning to end. Standout tracks that I really enjoyed off of this one, 7 of Hearts, I thought was really good. I liked the change of pace with Fire in the Sky. I thought it was really something different for the album, which I really enjoyed. And the one we'll be hearing in just a moment, Judgment Day. Really enjoyed that as well. But honestly, it's a great album from beginning to end. I really enjoyed listening through it today, and definitely looking forward to checking out more from these guys. We're going to be checking out Judgment Day from the album Aftermath Chronicles and Isospin. Let's check that out now.
And to find out that it's a two-person project kind of makes sense now, but it's just it feels classic and modern kind of simultaneously, and it's just like if music can be flawless, this is kind of what it is, almost to the point where you're like, there's got to be something isn't quite right? It can't really be this just smooth throughout, but it is. It's really good.
Yeah, I heard the sample track and thought, oh, this isn't bad. And then, when you get to kind of choosing, at least the way I go about it is first off, I kind of start with Mike's list because he goes through and kind of marks the ones that we should probably take a look at least because our music tastes are pretty similar, or at least similar enough that I can kind of judge off of what he has. And then I'll go through and try to pick a few that I want to listen to more than just the sample track. And this was one. And like I said, with the sample track, I was like, oh, these guys are pretty good. And then I got to the album, and then, like you said, it just sucks you in, and before you realize it, you're on track 6, track 7. It's like, wow, I just went straight through that, and it was just so good that I couldn't put it down. But really enjoyed this one. Chris, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, you talked about the wide variety of sounds on the album, and not even just that, but the wide variety of sounds on single tracks like the one you played alone. I mean, you have your prog inspirations there. They've been likened to Dream Theater, Opeth, stuff that we've seen before with other prog bands, but you've also got that classic metal sound and even a little bit of alternative mixed in there. So much like Mike, at first I was at a loss of words to even describe their sound or really know what I was listening to off of the sample track. But yeah, wide variety, and that's something that we always love to see, and something that usually puts it on our list almost immediately.
Yeah, no question about it. Usually one of us will grab a band that not only is just so smooth like this one is, but also just goes in so many different directions and yet pulls it all together so well. So definitely check out Isospin with Aftermath Chronicles. Our final choice of new music for the week is a female-fronted band. We are going to be headed to the country of Peru, I believe, for the first time on this podcast. So we are headed to Peru. The band is Natthammer with The Hammer of the Witch. This band is from Lima in Peru. It is a female-fronted band led by Fatima Natthammer. But we hear a lot of female-fronted bands on this podcast, and a lot of really good ones. We've picked several over the weeks. But this is kind of a different sound from your female-fronted band, and I think this is why it's so good. It's definitely a more deeper vocal range out of Natthammer, but it fits with the music better with the rock and heavy metal as opposed to maybe some of the progressive bands where they lean toward the more operatic end of the vocal range. I think it works very much so. They classify themselves as hard rock, heavy metal, but I do hear some prog influences. There are some interesting time signatures in some of these songs that slow up and speed up kind of within 10 or 15 seconds of each other, which I really enjoyed, especially in the song Guardian of Light, which we're going to check out in a couple of minutes. It makes the song so much more interesting. It's not the same thing at the same pace for an entire track. I really enjoy that. Just really impressed with the band. Great driving guitars, awesome drum fills, great bass lines. Just It is solid all the way around, and it feels like all parts of this band complement each other so well. Just really great. It comes out of the gate really strong. I think the first few tracks are maybe the strongest part of the album, but that's really what you want. I particularly like Steel Warrior, Evil Nightmare, and Guardian of Light, which we're going to be checking out in a moment, but definitely check out Natthammer with the Hammer of the Witch, which is what we are going to be doing now. We are going to check out Guardian of Light, and we will do that right now.
The endless light, guardian of light, enough to run on life. Guardian of light, and leave all our fears behind. Guardian of light, enough to run on life. Guardian of light, and leave all our fears behind. Time is running out, but we still want to fight. We all belong to the universe. We will be gone to dust
really
and
want
we'll
to
be
spotlight
born
that
again with the hope of finding answers. My life is close forever. That mind to make more noise, just singing. It's in this and life is a journey to I am not afraid. It's surrounding me now. Deep endless light, guardian of light, enough to run on life. Guardian of light, and leave all our fears behind. Guardian of light, enough to run on life. Guardian of light, and leave all our fears behind. Time is running out, but we still want to
South America, you can clue us in. There's kind of inherent in metal in South America. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, the other people that play just took down 7 years back about not having the because I feel like they're classic rock. But I mean, this really is just seeped in classic rock. And if anybody gets the chance, definitely check out the album cover. That's what struck me first because both of Matt's picks were pretty close picks to mine. But that album cover just drew me in because it reminded me of the movie Heavy Metal from back in the day, with the scantily clad like goddess woman riding a flaming Harley through the sky. Like it just screamed heavy metal, and the album itself screams heavy metal. So definitely check this one out.
Yeah, really enjoyed this one. Natthammer with the Hammer of the Witch. That is our final new music pick for the releases from May the 3rd. You're listening to a live podcast on the Nerdcast Empire live on Twitch. If you're catching us on Sunday evening Eastern Time, you're catching us live. Of course, the video on demand will be up on Twitch a little bit later on. Of course, you can catch the VOD on YouTube, on our YouTube page as well. And of course, if you listen to the audio version of the podcast, you can catch it wherever you get your podcast. It just won't have the music clips in it. And it's going to have a break coming up. And that's what we're going to do now. When we come back on the other side of the break on the podcast version of this, we're going to go into the vault where we're going to give you some classic albums you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, it is our weekly music show, Music Weekly, formerly known as Music Mondays on the Nerdcast Empire. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We do have a store on the Nerdcast Empire website. You can pick up your Nerdcast Empire merch. And, of course, we do have a Ko-fi page on there. You can listen to any of our past podcasts. This is number 61, believe it or not. So you can check out all of our past podcasts, our past music episodes, if you want to check out some of the bands that we've spotlighted over the past few weeks, actually 14 weeks now. So we are rolling through this. This week's schedule, we'll just say to be announced, because Mike and I are going to be hitting the road coming up on Thursday. We are headed to Animazement down in Raleigh, North Carolina. The plan is to bring you a podcast sometime Thursday evening where we're going to hopefully talk about our previous trip to Rio Grande and a little bit that goes into that. And we're also going to maybe talk a little bit about our trip to Animazement, and if anything interesting happens on the way down to Raleigh, we'll let you know about that. So that'll be coming up on Thursday. And then again, tentatively the plan 1 week from tonight would be back with you for another episode of Music Weekly. Again, that's just going to depend on our travel schedule coming back from Raleigh, because it's about 8 hours in the car, and then you add in stops and weather, because the weather's never good when we go that direction. Usually takes about 10 plus hours to get back. So we'll keep you updated on our social media, let you know as it changes, but we will definitely be bringing you a couple of podcasts coming up live on Twitch and, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. It's time to go into the vault, where we're each going to bring you a classic album that you need to check out. We're going to start with Chris. Chris did not get a chance to spotlight a vault pick last week, so this week you're going to get a chance to spotlight that vault pick. What do you have for us this week, Chris?
Yep, sticking with my soundtrack listings. I've gone to movies before, TV series, and I'm going to try to keep it unique still. I'm going to go to video games with Mick Gordon's Doom 2016 soundtrack. Mick Gordon, to me, is a virtuoso when it comes to making metal game soundtracks. He both creates music that I can listen to outside of the game, while also creating music that draws me to play the games he creates soundtracks for just from hearing it. It's a feat that I feel has become rare in the modern age, and to me, he's up there with the likes of Nobuo Uematsu, Yasunori Masuda, and Koji Kondo. Songs like Rip and Tear and BFG Division are big ones off of this album that most fans gravitate towards, but I feel like any metal fans can throw this on and listen to it front to back, even through the sections that are just brooding monologues from this demonic entity. When making this, and this is straight off the Wikipedia, it was wild for me to read that id Software didn't want Gordon to use guitars because they thought that the thrash sounds of the original games were now corny in today's day and age. Luckily, he eventually talked them into letting him blend in some metal with the synthesizers and some guitar work. Unfortunately, Gordon and id Software had a falling out during his recording of the soundtrack for the sequel, Doom Eternal. Honestly, if you love dark synth music just seeped in the heaviest of metal riffing and the thrashiest of breakdowns that truly makes you feel like you're chainsawing through an otherworldly horror, this album and Mick Gordon overall is for you. I'm just spotlighting this album because it's quite possibly his most popular work, but he's done so many great soundtracks for other games. I know he's done Destroy All Humans 2. Killer Instinct was amazing. He redid the entire intro for Killer Instinct when they re-released the game into kind of the 3D non-arcade realm, and honestly, that's better than the original. So definitely go deeper into his work, check out all the metal soundtracks that he's made.
Yeah, I think anytime you can work metal music into a video game, I think you're doing something right. I kind of yield to my metal experts and my video game experts to get some thoughts on this. So definitely something I want to check out a little bit more of. But Mike, any thoughts on this specific album or just his catalog in general?
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack is metal as all get out. It's amazing. And really, when you haven't played the game, but you remember playing the original Doom from back in the day, to me, it has that same emotion to it. Like, it feels like a modernized take on you just think of even just like the beginning level of Doom from back in the day. Like, that's kind of the same emotion it elicits. It is kind of crazy to think that a company would think that metal guitars would somehow be corny in a game where it's a first person shooter where you're killing demons. Like, we're already there, guys. Like, you have to understand that action, there's a sound that goes along with that. And I think that's what you're looking for. His work's amazing, and it's not surprising that you'd have metal bands like Bring Me the Horizon and Motionless in White wanting to work with him. So, yeah, I mean, can't argue with it.
Yeah, definitely not. So definitely check that out or any of his work. I think you won't go wrong if you're a fan of the music from games like Doom or just a fan of metal music in general. I think you can't really go wrong either way. So great pick from the vault this week. Mike, you are continuing through the alphabet on the vault, and believe it or not, we have reached the halfway point of the alphabet. I can't say I'm shocked by the band you chose, but certainly no shortage of albums you could possibly choose from this band. What do you have for us in the vault this week?
Yeah, I was just kind of crunching the numbers, and it looks like about 12% of the CDs I own begin with the letter M as far as the artist, which isn't surprising when you're into hard rock and metal. I mean, my Metallica and Megadeth alone equal a large portion of that. But yeah, going into that, very few bands have been as kind of influential on my fandom of heavy metal as the band Megadeth, so it's certainly not surprising that I would pick them. Then the choice comes to which album to pick, and that was really difficult because, I can sit here and talk about Rust in Peace for any amount of time. I think back to kind of the first album of theirs that I discovered when I first learned about Megadeth, because I was obviously, due to my age, a little late to the party. I didn't get on board until Cryptic Writings in '97, but I didn't want to go that direction either. The album I ended up going with is actually their 10th studio album from 2004, and that is The System Has Failed.
Yeah, again, there's really no wrong answer here with Megadeth. I mean, I'm sure there are some albums that some fans might think might not be the best choice, but overall, I think this is a really good album. Maybe for casual metal fans, they might not see as many hits off of this album as some of the other ones, but as you'll kind of explain, this still is a really important album to Megadeth and Megadeth fans.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of mentioning that being the age I am and when I got into heavy metal, a lot of the bands I got into were already, past their prime, so to speak. So for there still to be some bands that were putting out music, you were kind of excited about that, and Megadeth was certainly one of them. So back in 2001, they released The World Needs a Hero, and then not too long after, the beginning of 2002, he just up and disbands the band. What ended up happening is he relapsed and suffered this really weird nerve injury that left him unable to play guitar, so he was just like, well, I guess we're done. Well, fast forward 2 years and a lot of extensive rehab to get his arm working again. He gets back together. This was kind of felt like more of a solo effort. He did bring in Chris Poland, who was the original guitarist in Megadeth back in the day for Killing Is My Business and Peace Sells. They had a real bad falling out after that, so it was cool to bring him back in the fold as far as the musical direction. Like, you can kind of hear when it's a Chris Poland solo. He just has his own style about him. And then some session musicians, and he released The System Has Failed, which was interesting, just the content of the album, because to me, obviously all Megadeth albums are Dave Mustaine albums when you really break it down. But this one to me felt like it had more of him writing about his personal feelings and just life in general. You had songs like Tears in a Vial, which was basically about him having to give up Megadeth a few years back. Tracks like Die Dead Enough, The Scorpion, Back in the Day, Something That I'm Not, Of Mice and Men. They just, to me, they all, when you read the lyrics to them, they all kind of felt like it was him talking about something in his life, which I thought was just kind of a change of pace. You did still have kind of the politically charged songs like Blackmail the Universe, Kick the Chair. What was the other one? I Know Jack was the other one, which wasn't a very long song, but definitely has some political reference there. Kind of an odd side note is that the song Back in the Day was actually used on an episode of the Duck Dodgers cartoon, which is really weird. You can find it on YouTube, but the album is to me, it was the kind of return to form that I wanted The World Needs a Hero to be, but it wasn't. And then, after this, he kind of gets a more steady lineup, and then they end up coming back with United Abominations later, which is probably one of their best modern albums of all time. But this one was really important for what it was, and that's kind of why I wanted to highlight it today.
I think it comes out of the gate really strong. You start off with Blackmail the Universe, Die Dead Enough, and Kick the Chair right out of the gate. I mean, those are all really strong tracks on their own. Yeah. Of Mice and Men comes a little bit later. That's another really good one.
Great
Probably metal fans will have recognized that as one of their big hits. They've had a couple of, re-releases. They added some tracks in 2019. Some bonus tracks were added, like Time/Use the Man was added, a live version of that, and The Conjuring.
I didn't realize until today, actually, that they had remastered a bunch of the more modern albums. Back around 2004, maybe, they remastered like the back catalog, pretty much Killing Is My Business. No, well, actually, they didn't do Killing Is My Business at that point in time, I don't think, because they were having issues with using their Cover of These Boots. There was some rights issues there or something to that effect. But their Capitol albums, like Peace Sells through Euthanasia, I believe it was, they had remasters of all those with bonus tracks. So really cool that they've now gone back and caught up some of the others that probably needed to be remastered, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember you buying the original set of remasters when they came out in the early 2000s. And
really cool. If you put them all side by side, there's like a skull image on the spines. It's really cool.
It's one of those Easter eggs for the physical collector that, you can't get when you download the MP3s. Like, you got the music, which is great, and support music however you can, but if you can pick up the physical releases, not just these Vault bands, but any of these bands we talk about, almost all of them have a Bandcamp page. Almost all of them offer some sort of physical release version. If you can buy these, if you hear something on our program, you're like, man, I want to check that out. Yeah, go on to YouTube Music, listen to the album. But man, if you like it, buy their album. Like, buy a shirt, buy something.
Yeah, buy merch. Do what a lot of people do, kind of the old school metal fans, and buy patches and make yourself a really cool metal vest. I mean, whatever. Just do something to kind of show your support and appreciation for these artists.
Like, the best part of this podcast has been finding out that so much of this music is still here and it's still alive and it's still strong. Like, we want to continue to see that it is strong and continues to be made. So please support these bands in any way you can. Chris, any thoughts on Megadeth and The System Has Failed?
Yeah, I knew who M was going to be on Mike's list. It was just a matter of the album, and this one was a pleasant surprise. I mean, like you said, the story behind the album is almost just as important as the material itself, with them coming off of Risk and the fans kind of being like, okay, so old Megadeth is done now. This is what they are now. They're just shooting for the mainstream. And then you get World Needs a Hero, a little bit of a turn in direction back toward what the longtime fans were hoping for. And this feels like it's just a delivery on that. Like, look, we're back. It's also kind of a venting session for Dave Mustaine, and that kind of like almost a solo album feel where he's getting all of this stuff off of his chest, all his issues with any bandmates, his arm issues, his relapsing. It's just a total reset for the band, and they came out strong after this. So this is pivotal in the history of Megadeth, and it really shows, even if it doesn't have as many of the massive hits from some of the other albums.
First off, I did think there was a chance, just because I know you have so much music, that you might like, hey, everybody expect me to pick Megadeth, I'm going to pick Merciful Fate or something like that.
Because I did do King Diamond previously, so I figured that would be maybe not cheating, but at least kind of hitting the same band.
Right.
Metallica is always an option.
Yeah.
Big Metallica fan. One of the bands that I saw are now back working on new material that I really like, certainly not mainstream, is the Megas.
Yeah.
Their music based on the Mega Man video games and Castlevania. Just really cool stuff.
Yeah, so lots of options there, but not a terrible surprise there that Megadeth is the pick. But The System Has Failed. Definitely check that out. A great pick from the vault from Mike this week. I'm continuing through the years. A few weeks ago, if you've been listening to the podcast each and every week, it started with the original release from the band Chicago when they were known as Chicago Transit Authority. That was released in 1969. Each year we have gone forward a year, and as we've done that each and every year, the list of albums that has come out that are just so outstanding continues to grow, and we're in 1978 this year, so we are almost to the time of my birth, and the list of albums that came out in 1978, just some really big albums from really big bands that were going to influence what they were going to do. But in the end, after some discussion and kind of thinking about it, I'm going to go with the second studio album from the British-American rock band Foreigner. It was released in June of 1978. It is Double Vision. And this, to me, is obviously their debut album, Foreigner, was really good as well. But it feels like, we've got Double Vision in 78. Next year, we're going to get Head Games. they are going to get into this run here where they're just churning out hit album after hit album. This one peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200 charts, earned platinum certification a week after its release. It's now been certified 7 times platinum. It is among their best-selling albums. They have a compilation album that is actually right there with it, but as far as an individual album, I think this is right there at number 1. The lead single was Hot Blooded, reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, followed by the title track Double Vision, which charted at number 2. The third single from the album was Blue Morning, Blue Day, which got up to number 15. That's probably one of my favorite songs on the album, but this is just such an outstanding album front to back. On side 1, you start out with Hot Blooded, Blue Morning, Blue Day, You're All I Am, Back Where You Belong, and Love Has Taken Its Toll. That front side is just strong beginning to end. And then you flip it and go side 2, and you start off with Double Vision. Then an instrumental song, Tremontaine, which I believe, at least as of this point in their career, it was the only instrumental track they'd released. Then I Have Waited So Long, Lonely Children, Spellbinder, wrap it up. There was a remastered version of this as well. It came out in 2002. They added Hot Blooded and Love Maker live versions at the end of this. But, just a classic lineup. Lou Gramm leading the way with lead vocals. Mick Jones coming in and doing vocals on co-vocals on Blue Morning, Blue Day, and then came back with You're All I Am, Back Where You Belong. Then Lou Gramm came back for Love Has Taken Its Toll to wrap up the A-side. Ian McDonald on guitars, keyboards, Al Greenwood. This is Foreigner at its best. Just a fantastic classic rock album. And again, really kind of the start of what was going to be a few years where they really could do no wrong as far as rock releases. Check this one out. Double Vision from Foreigner from 1978. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, great album, obviously. I remember, as a kid having their greatest hits and kind of assuming, well, that's all the good songs. That's all you'd need, right? And then I heard Blue Morning, Blue Day the first time, and I'm like, wait, why isn't this on the greatest hits? What's up with this? And to this day, it bothers me that song, as well as Back Where You Belong, didn't make that initial greatest hits release. To me, those are both just amazing tracks. And kind of looking at it now, I think Lou Gramm is kind of underrated as a lead vocalist.
Yes, I 100% agree, and I think I don't think he gets enough credit. I think he has a very bluesy quality to his rock vocals. He really gave them that distinctive sound, and I know there's a lot of talk because I believe they're going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here shortly, and I know there's a lot of talk about, will Lou Gramm be there to sing? Will Kelly Hansen, who's been the one singing in the modern era? I think I heard, let me see if I can just verify this real quick. It's Chris in our chat quoting Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which I knew was going to happen when I picked this one. But the list of band members that Foreigner has had is extensive. If you go on, you go on Wikipedia and they always have these charts that show the number of people in the band. And because I had heard this on one of the classic Rewind channels, I believe, on satellite radio, but the list takes up the whole screen. You've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33, 36, 39 that are just listed as core band members. That doesn't even count touring band members and studio musicians and session musicians that are all listed on the Wikipedia page. The current lineup is Mick Jones, Jeff Pilson, Kelly Hansen, Michael Bluestein, Bruce Watson, Chris Frazier, and Luis Maldonado. That's their current lineup. But again, it'll be interesting to see who actually shows up when they go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But Chris, your thoughts other than your Aqua Teen Hunger Force comments in the live chat?
It's hard to get away from Aqua Teen when we're talking about Foreigner, but no, enough's already been said about Hot Blooded and Double Vision, but it's that instrumental track, Tremontaine, that kind of blew me away because that's where you really see that the band, even on their second album, was still willing to experiment a little bit. They weren't just getting stuck in that same kind of formula that admittedly did give them early success, but they're still willing to go out there, try something different, maybe a little too often with the amount of band members that you listed there. But yeah, it's absolutely classic album, and can't wait till you're able to pick a Loverboy album. Speaking of Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Since I probably won't come back to Foreigner the next couple of years, I do want to just kind of mention the follow-ups because I mentioned Head Games. You got Dirty White Boy, Love on the Telephone, Woman, Head Games. Those are Rev on the Red Line. That's all on Head Games.
Head Games, the song is a tremendous song.
It is. And then they come back with Foreigner 4 after that, which is probably their biggest pop success, I would say, which, as most of those bands of that era kind of went into that phase. That was released in 1981, but you had Jukebox Hero and Waiting for a Girl Like You and Urgent. Every time I hear Urgent, so how the rest of that goes. But again, that's 3 albums in a row that is basically, you could take those 3 albums and release them in a box set and call it a greatest hits, and you'd be doing okay. So, a great band, certainly one I really love, and excited they're finally getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or whatever you want to call that place in Cleveland. But we'll get Eddie Trunk riled up on that one again. But definitely worth checking out. Chris, any final thoughts on our live edition of our Music Weekly show?
Was happy to finally be here for a live edition of Music Weekly now, or Music Live, whatever we're calling it nowadays. But it's been fun, and some amazing albums there. I definitely need to get up there and update our Spotify playlist with some of these. It's been a blast.
Yeah, definitely a lot of fun. Mike, your final thoughts?
Yeah, you mentioned Eddie Trunk. I think people should go and check out Sebastian Bach's new music video. He's still out there releasing music and actually sounds pretty good. So, those are my
Love
final
him
thoughts.
and Gilmore Girls.
A lot of people did, apparently. Wasn't my thing, but it's all right.
Yeah, we didn't really get notified of his new album, so that might be something that we'll have to revisit in the vault at some point, or maybe we'll have an episode somewhere down the line where it's like, oh, these are all the albums that weren't on a list for some reason, but these were all really good, and you should check these out as well. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of Music Weekly, live on Twitch. Thank you to everybody who's joined us on Twitch to check this out, and big thanks to the guys as well. Big thanks to Mike for all the hard work he goes into putting this list together each and every week so that we can put this together. And big thanks to everyone who's checked out some of our other episodes that we're doing live on Twitch. It's something new for us, but I think it's going to make for better content. And it's going to allow us to do more things. And we're still kind of figuring out, or I'm still kind of figuring out the whole OBS thing, but I will eventually get that mastered as we continue to do this, and things will get better each and every week. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Again, you can catch the VOD either here on Twitch or on YouTube, or if you're listening on your podcast platforms, you can catch that as well each and every week wherever you get your podcast. That's going to wrap things up. We'll have a couple more podcasts coming up this week, hopefully around the times that we normally do. But again, we'll be traveling, so we will let you know how that's going to go. But check us out for more podcasting action coming up later this week on the Nerdcast Empire. That's going to wrap things up for the guys. Once again, I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.